everybody. So I'm sorry that I couldn't be here with you today. Unfortunately, I had a meeting scheduled for this morning, but we are still going to take notes and learn about a little something called slope. So if you guys could turn to page 15 of your packets, we are going to go ahead and get started. If you are somebody who likes to coordinate your notes with mine and likes to make sure that they're using different colors so they can really visually see what's going on, today's a great day to have those colors out. All right, so slope, if you've ever heard of it before, is the ratio of two things. Now, a ratio means that this is going to be a fraction, so we're going to be working with a lot of fractions today. The ratio of these two things is the ratio of vertical change divided by horizontal change. So we're going to be writing fractions today, and those fractions are going to be describing the steepness of a line by looking at the vertical change divided by the horizontal change. One way that a lot of people often describe slope is that slope is rise over run. Now, when I say rise, I mean up or down. So rise doesn't necessarily just mean up. If you're going up, we describe the rise as positive, and if you're going down, we describe the rise as negative. When I say run, I mean moving left and right. Now, when I say left, I mean going negative, and when I say right, I mean going positive. So just like when we graphed points, if we had to go up, it was positive. If we had to go right, it was positive. And if we had to go down, it was negative. If we had to go left, it was negative. We're talking about the same thing. We're looking at a graph. We're describing rise and run. Up is positive, down is negative, left is negative, right is positive. Now, what are we going to actually ask you to do? Slope describes the steepness of a line. So to practice this, I'm going to have you draw a sketch of a line. I want you to start with a graph, and I want you to graph 2 points here. We're going to make our axes go from -2 to +2. Now, the first point that I want you to graph is at -2, 0. And the second point that I want you to graph is at 2, 2. And we're going to draw a line right through those points. So this is the point -2, 0, and this is the point 2, 2. When I say we're going to be finding slope, we know we're going to look at the rise, which is the vertical change, over the run, which is the horizontal change. So let's start by looking at the rise. Between this point and this point, my line travels up, rise. It travels up 2 spaces. So we would say that our rise is 2. Between these 2 points, my line travels to the right 4 spaces. So we would say that the run is 4. So 4 would go on the bottom. Rise over run. In the end, because this is a ratio, we would reduce that to 1/2. So the slope of this line would be 1/2. Now, one rule about slope is that we can only use this method for straight lines. So if you ever see a graph where it's curvy which you will eventually see later on this year, this whole slope thing doesn't work for those. Now there are 3 types of problems I can give you when I'm talking about slope. The first type of problem is I can say find the slope between these 2 points. Here's what I do not want you to do. I do not want you to draw a graph and try to count rise over run. The reason is because I'm going to be giving you some pretty big numbers. A lot of times when you draw a graph, you make mistakes. You don't count quite right. You're not spacing everything evenly. Something goes wrong and you count wrong and you get the wrong answer. So instead of drawing a graph, whenever I give you 2 points, we're going to have a formula that you're going to use. Here is the slope formula, and you need to memorize this formula. It's really important. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I'm going to put bubble around it. I'm going to put stars by it. This is like super important. Now, what do I mean by y2, y1, x2, x1? Remember back at the beginning of this chapter, we said every ordered pair has an x and a y coordinate. Since this is the first ordered pair, we call these numbers x1 and y1, the 1 meaning this is the first ordered pair. Since this is the second ordered pair, we call these numbers x2 and y2, meaning this is the second ordered pair, the second x and the second y. So if I were to calculate these numbers based on these ordered pairs, the formula says I start with y2. So I'm going to look at the y value from the second ordered pair, which is a 6. Then minus, now I'm going to look at y1, which is the y value from the first ordered pair, which is a 2. Divided by, now I'm going to look at the x2, which is the x value from the second ordered pair, so 2 minus, now I'm going to look at x1, which is the x value from the first ordered pair, so negative 4. Finally, I'm just going to simplify this. 6 minus 2 is 4. 2 minus negative 4. Minus minus actually makes plus plus. So we get 6. And if I reduce that, I get 2 over 3. Now, if you're somebody who's like, I can't do that in my head, that is totally fine. Remember, you're going to have a calculator. So if I wanted to, I could type in on my calculator 2 minus parentheses negative 4, and it would tell me that this was 6. And I could type in my calculator alpha y equals 4 over 6 and hit enter, and it will tell me that this reduces to 2 over 3. So I'm not really asking you to do a whole lot of mental math here, just a lot of, being meticulous, making sure you're putting the numbers in the right spot. So that's option 1. I'm going to give you 2 points. Option 2 is I could give you a table. Now, if I give you a table, really a table is just a bunch of points. So we're going to use that same formula. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Since a table is a bunch of points, we can pick any 2 points that we want. I usually just pick the first 2 because they're convenient. So if I look at those first 2 points, I would have y, so this is point number 1, this is point number 2. So the y value from point number 2 would be negative 2, minus the y value from point number 1 would be negative 5, divided by the x value from point number 2 would be negative 1, and the x value from point number 1 would be negative 2. So, again, I have a calculator if I need it. I happen to know that 2 negatives make a positive. So, negative 2 plus 5 would be 3. Negative 1 plus 2 would be 1, which reduces to just 3. Now these 2 methods, whether I give you 2 points or I give you a table, are very similar because we're just using a formula. But if I give you a graph If all I do is give you a graph and say find the slope, I absolutely do not expect you to use a formula. All I want you to do is look at rise over run. Between these 2 points, the rise is 2. So I would have a 2 on the top. Now between these 2 points, I need to go left 2 spaces. To get from here to here, I have to go left 2 spaces. So I would write -2 on the bottom because I'm going to the left. When I reduce that, I get -1. Okay, those are the 3 things I need you to walk out of here being able to do. So we're going to practice them a bunch of times. First, let's look at a bunch of graphs. When I give you a graph, I want you to think rise over run. I do not want you to use a formula when there's a graph. So let's talk about rise. In this picture, I would rise by 2 spaces. So I would put a +2 on the top. Then my run would be 4 spaces, and this time we're going to the right, so that would be a positive, which means my answer will be 1/2 when I reduce that. In the next problem, my rise would be +4. I'm going up 4 spaces. And my run would be right 2 spaces. Again, to the right means it's positive. So I would get 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Now in the next picture, I would rise 2 spaces. But this time, I need to go to the left. If I go to the left, my answer is -4 because I went left. So that reduces to -1/2. Again, my answer this time is negative because I went to the left. Now let's practice finding the slope if I give you 2 points. I would recommend that for these points, you always write down your formula first because you do need to have it memorized, and one of the best ways to memorize a formula is to write it down a bunch of times. So here would be x1, y1. Here would be x2, y2. If I plug in those numbers, y2 would be -1 minus y1 would be 2 divided by x2 would be -4 minus x1 would be 5. If I simplify that, again, you have a calculator, so don't panic. You can always type it in. You would get -3 divided by -9, and again, you need to reduce it, so you would get +1/3. For problem number 5, we're going to write down our formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I like to label, so x1, y1, x2, y2. We're going to start with y2. So y2 is -3 minus y1 is 5. x2 is 1/2 minus x1 is 9/2. Now I know fractions make people nervous, but please don't panic, you have a calculator. -3 minus 5 is -8. 1/2 minus 9/2, you actually get -4. Now this reduces to +2. Last but not least, let's look at a table. So again, we're going to use that same formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, only instead of saying here are your points, they just gave us the points in a table. So here's going to be point number 1, here's going to be point number 2. y2 goes first, so the y value would be negative 9, I can read, negative 9, minus y1 goes second, so you would have negative 6, divided by x2 would be negative 1, minus x1 would be negative 2. So we would get negative and a negative make a positive. All right, now we get negative 9 plus 6 is negative 3. Negative 1 plus 2 is 1, which reduces to negative 3. I'm going to save problem 7 for tomorrow in class in case we need to go over this while I'm here. I'm hoping that using the formula is making sense, and I'm hoping that looking at rise over run is making sense. The only thing you really need to watch out for with rise over run is whether you're going left or right. The last thing I want to talk about today is that there are really 3 types of slope, or 4 types of slope. There are positive slopes, which are going uphill. There are negative slopes, which are going downhill. There are zero slopes, which are flat. They're zero fun, is what I like to say. And there are undefined slopes. The reason we say these slopes are undefined, or another way to say that would be does not exist, is because if you tried to take a ride on this, if you tried to ski on a hill that looked like this, you would no longer exist. Now the difference here is that we always read a graph from left to right, just like you would read a sentence. So positive is going uphill from left to right. Negative is going downhill. 0 is completely flat. It's zero fun. And undefined would be you would no longer be defined. You would be a pancake if you tried to ski on that. One way that we can remember the difference between a zero slope and an undefined slope is to go back to our old friend Vuxhoy. So we said in a previous day that the V stands for vertical lines, and the x stands for that x equals a number in the equation. But we didn't talk about what the u means. The u means that vertical lines have an undefined slope. So if you ever see a vertical line, the slope is going to be undefined. The u is for undefined. We also said that horizontal lines have a y equals a number in their equation, but we didn't say what the O was for. The O actually stands for 0. Horizontal lines have 0 as their slope. So these middle letters, which we said the other day we weren't going to learn about yet, we're learning about them now. Undefined slope, 0 slope. Vuxhoy. All right, now let's take a look at these ordered pairs. Let's just do one of these two of these examples together. For number 8, if it said find the slope, I would go back to my trusted formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I would plug in my numbers. So y2 would be 4, minus x2 would be 4, y1 would be 4. x2 would be 4, minus x1 would be negative 2. If I simplify this, I get 0 divided by 6, which is 0. So this line would have a 0 slope. Now this is important because the directions here say classify the slope as positive, negative, undefined, or 0. Ooh, I just realized you can't see what I was writing. I'm going to give you a second to copy that. So we have to specify here that our number was 0, which is a 0 slope. In problem 9, we would do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. We would have 1 minus 5 divided by 3 minus 3, which is negative 4 divided by 0. Now, if we type that in on our calculator and we try to simplify it, it's going to say divide by 0 error. Does everyone see that? It says error. The reason that that's an error is because you're not allowed to divide by 0 in math. So you would say that the answer is that the slope is undefined. Now, a lot of students go, well, why didn't that happen in number 8? In number 8, where the 0 is on the top of the fraction, we just get 0. So 0 divided by 6 is just 0. But in number 9, where the 0 is on the bottom of the fraction, that's the error. That's not allowed. Let's do number 10. So the slope would be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we would get negative 2 minus 2 over 5 minus 5, which is negative 4 divided by 0. If I try to simplify that, I go, uh-oh, I'm not allowed to divide by 0. 0 cannot be on the bottom. So we would say that the slope is undefined. We're going to save number 11 in case we need one more problem to go over in class tomorrow to review. Your homework tonight is actually just a worksheet that's in your packet. So on pages 18 and 19 in your packet, all that you are being asked to do here is calculate a bunch of slopes, and at the end, classify the slope as being positive, negative, undefined, or 0. All right, I will see you guys tomorrow. If you have any questions, feel free to come see me after school. I will be in the building, just not until later, and I will talk to you then. Have a wonderful day.